The Mercy of Sol drifted silently through the nebula, its white hull emblazoned with crimson crosses that shimmered against the cosmic backdrop. As the largest hospital ship in Earth's humanitarian fleet, it carried over 3,000 patients, medical staff, and support personnel. Most of the patients were civilians from the outer colonies, victims of a mysterious respiratory illness that had swept through the frontier settlements. Captain Thomas watched from the bridge as his crew navigated the delicate passage. 20 years of service in Earth's peacekeeping forces had earned him this command, not a warship, but something he considered far more important, a vessel of healing. "Sir, unidentified vessels approaching from Sector 7, his navigation officer reported, her voice betraying a hint of concern. "Broadcast our medical status on all frequencies," Thomas ordered. "Remind them we're protected under the Galactic Accord." The approaching vessels, sleek, predatory shapes with hull configurations unlike anything in human records, continued their advance. The Mercy of Sol's communication array pinged repeatedly, sending the universal distress signal that identified them as a non-combatant medical vessel. "They're not responding, sir." Thomas frowned. "Continue broadcasting. Prepare evacuation protocols for critical patients." The first blast struck without warning, tearing through the ship's minimal defensive shields and rupturing the port medical bay. Alarms blared as emergency bulkheads slammed shut, but not before 27 patients and medical staff were exposed to the vacuum of space. "They're targeting life support," the tactical officer shouted as a second blast crippled the environmental systems. Captain Thomas stared in disbelief. In 3 centuries of space exploration and conflict, no civilization had ever deliberately targeted a clearly marked hospital ship. It was the one rule that all spacefaring species understood. The sick and wounded were not legitimate targets. His final act was to activate the black box recorder and transmit a simple message back to Earth. "Hospital ship Mercy of Sol under attack. They know what we are." The message reached Earth Command 16 hours later. Admiral Wilson stood before the assembled military council, her weathered face grim as the footage from the Mercy of Sol played on the central display. The council chamber fell silent as they watched the unprovoked destruction of the hospital ship, the methodical targeting of patient quarters, the final moments as the bridge was breached. 4,112 souls, Wilson said quietly. Medical personnel, patients, children. General Park, the usually taciturn head of strategic operations, removed his glasses. "Do we know who they are?" "The Krull Dominion," answered Dr. Hayes, the xenologist. "A species we've had no direct contact with until now. They occupy territory beyond the Orion Arm. According to intelligence gathered from other species, they consider medical intervention to be a violation of natural law. They believe that healing the sick interferes with evolutionary processes." Admiral Wilson's voice was steel. "They believe slaughtering doctors and patients is justified by their philosophy." "Yes," Hayes replied simply. The room fell silent again. Finally, Fleet Marshal Davis spoke. "Earth has maintained a primarily defensive posture for 70 years. Our war fleet has been reduced to a peacekeeping force, but we still have the capability." "The Gray Protocols," Wilson said. It wasn't a question. Davis nodded. "Precisely." Few in the room had ever expected to implement the Gray Protocols, contingency plans developed during Earth's darkest hours of interstellar conflict. They had remained dormant for generations, a last resort never to be used. Within 24 hours, shipyards throughout the Sol system hummed with activity as dormant warships were reactivated. Retired officers were recalled to service. The massive factory complexes on Mars, repurposed decades ago for civilian production, began manufacturing weapons of war once more. The Krull, for their part, seemed unaware of what they had provoked. Their attack on the Mercy of Sol had been, to them, a minor operation to enforce their biological principles in a newly discovered region of space. They had no concept of what humanity had once been, what humanity could become when threatened. 3 weeks later, the first wave of Earth's resurrected war fleet arrived at the edge of Krull territory. Not the modest peacekeeping vessels that patrolled human space, but the behemoths of an earlier age, dreadnoughts and planet crackers pulled from mothballed orbits their weapon systems upgraded with technologies developed but never implemented during the long peace. Commander Jackson stood on the bridge of the Retribution, the lead vessel of the assault fleet. Unlike Captain Thomas of the Mercy, Jackson had never seen actual combat. Few living humans had, but the simulations had been thorough, and the burning anger that united the crews of Earth's awakened war machine required no training. "All ships report ready, Commander," his executive officer reported. Jackson nodded. "Transmit the message." On every crawl communication frequency in their own language, Earth delivered its response. "You attacked a hospital ship. You killed healers and patients. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. There will only be justice." The crawl fleet that rose to meet them was substantial. Hundreds of the same predatory vessels that had destroyed the Mercy of Sol. They'd formed a defensive line, confident in their superior numbers. They had no understanding of what they faced. The first volley from Earth's war fleet tore through the crawl formation, weapons technologies that human diplomats had kept hidden from galactic records for generations. Shields collapsed, hulls ruptured, the void filled with debris. As the remnants of the crawl fleet scattered, Commander Jackson received a transmission, the crawl leadership requesting parley. "Shall I respond, sir?" his communications officer asked. Jackson thought of the hospital ship, of the patients who had died gasping for air as their pressurized wards ruptured. "No," he said quietly. "They had their chance for words. The war lasted 6 days. The crawl, who had built their dominion through intimidation of less advanced species, had never encountered an enemy like humanity, a species that had spent most of its history at war with itself before finding peace, a species that remembered what it was to be truly dangerous. When it was over, Earth recalled its fleet, leaving behind a shattered dominion and a message to the galaxy: attack our healers, and we will show you why we chose peace."